Welcome to the Water People podcast, where we talk story with some of the most adept waterfolk on the planet. I'm your host, Lauren Hill, joined by my partner, Dave Rastovich. Water People is a place to acknowledge and share the aquatic experiences that shape who we become back on land. This season is supported by Patagonia, whose purpose-driven mission is to use business to save our home planet. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the Bundjalung Nation, the traditional custodians of the land and waters where we work and play, who have cared for this sea country for tens of thousands of years. Respect and gratitude to all First Nations people, including elders past, present, and emerging. Today we're in conversation with body surfer and educator Tyler Wilde. In 2017, Tyler won the prestigious International Surf Festival Body Surfing Contest and was later accepted as the then youngest member of the Gillis Beach Body Surfing Association in Southern California. Tyler is the focus of the short film Gender Outlaw, which chronicles the role body surfing played in his gender transition. At its heart, Gender Outlaw is about the way the ocean can buoy us toward ourselves. It's a deeply personal story about the resilience and acceptance that Tyler found as a trans person through his own surfing and his body surfing community. All right, Tyler, we always begin these conversations in a similar place by asking about a time or experience after which you were never the same. Would you be willing to share a story like that from your own life with us today?
Absolutely. I assume this means that we've started the podcast or the interview now. So I just also wanted to say thank you for having me and reaching out. And I just really appreciate you all getting in touch with me and sharing my story. So for me, that moment in time would be the first time I went body surfing after top surgery. And so a little bit of a backstory. My name is Tyler. My pronouns are he and they, and I'm trans. And I got top surgery about probably around 4 years ago. And I came out shortly before that as trans. And before I came out, I didn't really have a lot of faith in myself as a trans person. I would say I was victim to a lot of the really toxic messaging surrounding trans people, and I was not immune to that. And so I had a lot of shame and a lot of just internalized transphobia that I really had to work through. And when I got top surgery, on one hand, it was one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. Not the actual act of getting surgery, but like once I was finally recovered and just the look and the feel and seeing myself in the mirror, just so euphoric. But even then, I was kind of afraid to do that in public. And when you're body surfing, like I'm just in a pair of Speedos and fins, right? It's pretty revealing. And I think we can agree that sometimes the surf environment or surf culture isn't always very inclusive. And so what I celebrated in private was really scary for me in public, just going down to the beach, changing into my Speedos, walking down the beach topless with these giant scars on my chest. I was nervous, but I'll tell you, when I finally got in the water, it was like a sunny summer day. Wasn't that big, maybe like 2 to 3 feet. It's one at my home break in Manhattan Beach. The water was in the 70s. It was late summer. I mean, it was just like beautiful, warm, glassy. I remember swimming and I was like, God, this like kind of feels a little funky, a little weird. And I caught my first wave. I'll tell you, like the feeling of the water rushing underneath my body and then like hitting my chest in a way that I have never experienced because I've always had a bathing suit or wetsuit or something. Just having like my whole body basically immersed in the water and feeling that energy. I can like feel it now, like when I close my eyes. It was the most euphoric, amazing like moment in time that I will forever be imprinted on my brain. And the only way I can describe it to other people is like if you've ever had braces. Did you have braces?
Yeah, okay. I did. I know.
I had braces for an interminably long time. It seemed like in middle school, right? But when you finally take them off and your teeth are all slimy and slippery and you just like can't stop licking the front of your teeth, that's how it felt. Like I felt like slippery, slimy, like maybe what a dolphin would look like or feel like if you were able to pet one. Like it just felt so foreign yet so exciting. And I haven't been able to feel that since. It was just like a one-time thing, right? But yeah, ever since then, I'll never be the same.
Thank you so much for sharing that moment with us. That's so personal. I'm moved especially by trans people who are willing to share these deeply, deeply personal experiences so publicly, because it's an insight to your unique experiences, like that one, like feeling water in a way that you'd never felt before. So thank you so much for letting us have a little window into that experience. It's very generous, very generous.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I'm happy to share.
I think I first saw photos of you body surfing on a now defunct Instagram community page called the Clam Clan. Do you remember that?
Oh, that was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. I first sort of picked up the thread on your story then. And then I think it was last year, we got to watch the beautiful short film of which you are the focus called Gender Outlaw. To me, it was such a story of belonging and how the ocean can carry us toward ourselves, no matter who we are. Can you share with us about basically your backstory with surfing before we dive into the film, how you found surfing, how you left surfing and why, and then why you came back to it?
Absolutely. So I found surfing, I grew up in Southern Orange County and my dad was a bodyboarder. My uncle was a longboarder. We were always at the beach. And so from the time I can remember, weekends were going to T Street. And that was like, we were in the car ready to go and we'd be there all day. And so I think I started off bodyboarding. Gosh, I mean, earliest childhood memories, maybe 5, 6, something like that. And then I learned to surf. I think I was around 12. My uncle took me to Doheny and we were just at the boneyard, just classic Southern California thing, just 1-foot rollers. And he probably put me on a 10-foot board and pushed me into my first wave and I was hooked, right? And I'd say I'd surfed, bodyboarded, gone to the beach. I was a complete beach baby all the way through high school. I went to college in Oregon and I could not hang with the 40-something degree water, Fahrenheit that is. It was just like frigid. I didn't love it that much. And so I think that started my departure from surfing. And that was just a means of, like, I was away and I didn't have the means for a really thick wetsuit. And it was just for me, it seemed temporary at the time. But then towards the end of my university days, I started to not really feel myself. And by that, I mean, I was suffering from anxiety, depression. And I think that probably kept me out of the water, even though I probably should have gone back to the water first thing. Sometimes when you get in that spiral, you can only just sit in that spiral until something tells you not to be in it anymore. And I was stuck in it for a while. And it has to do with a lot of different factors in my life, not just my queerness or my transness, but I was just kind of in a rut. And I was in that rut for a very long time. And so cut to maybe 6 or 7 years post-graduating from uni, I started dating someone who was a dolphin trainer of all things, like at an aquarium.
Wow.
And she loves swimming. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of aquariums. We can get in. That's another topic. But she loves the ocean and she wanted to learn to surf. And so I was like, well, I've got a little foamy. Let's do this. And so it was because of her I started getting back in the water because she was so stoked on learning how to surf. And I started body surfing because what do you do when you're teaching someone? You push them in the waves, you body surf one in, and then you help them swim back out. And then after that, I was like, I actually really love body surfing. Why haven't I been doing this whole time? And I think that was the start of me kind of turning the corner. And it took me a few years to really fall in love with it, like to the point where, you know, you sacrifice your late nights and you frozen first thing in the morning before work and there's snot dripping from your nose before you go to, like for me, I go to school, so I teach, you know, that kind of obsession didn't happen until a few years later. but I've had a healthy obsession with body surfing for at least the last 12 years.
I'm so glad that that worked out so well for you, because often have people ask me about learning to surf. Usually it's women, and usually their partners are surfing already. And I always say, yes, you should definitely follow that curiosity, but maybe don't learn from your partner, because it can get so complicated really quickly.
Well, truth be told, we're not together anymore, but but I'm body surfing, and I'm pretty sure she's still surfing.
Oh, well.
Well, I wonder if body surfing is a way to get out of that dynamic, you know? Because a lot of the times it goes pear-shaped because someone gets bonked on the head by the board, or, you know, they have a really scary moment, and that's generally how it ends. Have you found that, Tyler?
Well, I mean, you know, the one tip, you know, one thing I kept reiterating is just don't bail your board. You got to hold on to it. You pay your dues, you'll get tumbled around, but you just don't let go of your board. I'm swimming back out behind her. Wave comes. She goes to turtle. What does she do? She drops it. Board shoots, hit the fin, hit me right on the side of my eye, gashed my face like 1 millimeter over. I would have lost my left eye. It was a disaster. I mean, it was like split open. That wasn't what broke us, I don't think. But, you know, it was a downward. It was all downhill from there.
Oh, Tyler, you've said that, quote, body surfing saved your life. That's massive. I'd love to hear you elaborate on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I touched on it a little bit before. I was in a bad way, anxiety, depression, and then turning to all sorts of coping mechanisms that weren't healthy, right? From drinking and drugs to, you know, just poor decisions left and right. And this I can maybe attribute to being trans. At the time, I don't think I had an awareness of that, like an awareness of my gender identity. Things weren't right inside of me, right? And for a host of different reasons. But at that time, I didn't really see a future for myself. I didn't see, you know, even though I was partnered, even though I had a great job, like I couldn't see myself getting old. I couldn't see what the next 5 years looked like, or 10 years. And that to me kind of just seems strange. Like I thought about it and I'm like, well, I guess I just go day by day. And I think that was part of it. I didn't picture anything I didn't feel like I was worth spending more time on this earth for. I didn't really think that highly of myself. And the reason why I say body surfing saved me is once I started, I woke up every day wanting to get in the ocean. I woke up every day wanting to look for stoke. And through body surfing, I found a community of people that were really supportive. And if you want to wake up for dawn patrol, you better not be out partying the night before. And, you know, it was all of these things together that really turned my life around. And I wouldn't say it like cured my depression or anxiety by any means, but I finally found myself in a place where I was excited to wake up and get in the ocean every day. And I could see myself, you know, planning ahead for surf trips with my friends and little steps, right? And then as other things fell into place and I started to really actually get a handle on my gender identity and fill in a lot of missing pieces, then I was like, okay, like actually I'm to the point today where I can't wait to grow old with my partner, and I'm excited. You know, we've got plans to, you know, live on a cabin overlooking a really good point left, you know, in the middle of nowhere that no one knows. You know what I mean? That's fantasy, but but that's it's a healthy fantasy, and this is probably one of the first times in my life that I've had that. Yeah.
That's so nice to hear.
When you say filling in those missing pieces, the body surfing, what was it in concert with? Like what else was happening at that time for you to perhaps be buoyed by body surfing and to stop you from sinking and helping you swim a little? What else was happening for you to fill in those missing pieces at that time?
Oh, thank you so much for asking that. Yeah, you're right. Like body surfing was that buoy. It kept me going day to day. And the other pieces, I think it's really important for everybody to have a sense of community. And for me, prior to body surfing, my community was also a bunch of people who were partying. It was not like hanging out with the wrong crowd. They were great people, but it wasn't helpful. It wasn't conducive to me. And so I had a crew of body surfers, which you mentioned the film, it goes in depth or at length about the crew, and it's the Gillis Beach Bodysurfing Association, and really it's a bunch of old guys and me. The association was founded in '64, and I'm the youngest well, not anymore, actually. We have some new members, but I was probably one of the younger members up until recently. And, having a sense of community, I think, is really important for anybody, a sense of belonging. So there was one piece. Another piece was at school. I had always presented myself as masculine and without really understanding gender identity. Let me backtrack a little bit. So I'm 39 and I grew up in in 80s in Southern Orange County. Like I didn't have the language that we have today. Right.
Mm.
And so for me, I came out as gay, and I've always presented masculinely. I just thought it was part of my sexuality, really. I conflated the two, and I didn't know any better. And it wasn't until I think it's probably 5 years ago. No, probably 6 or 7 now. The years blend together. I was teaching at a school that's predominantly girls' school. I say predominantly because historically it's a girls' school, but now we have lots of students that identify outside of that gender binary. But anyways, I was working with a student, and he came out as trans, and his name's Alden, and he just opened my whole world of understanding to what transness is. And from basic stuff like definitions to sharing with me his experience and me helping him through his transition as a mentor when it comes to physical education. And if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't have it was like if you have a puzzle and you're missing just the one piece for it to be complete, like that was the final piece. I didn't even know that I had no idea that I was trans this whole time. I was like, wait, what? Well, light. And so that with the community, finally having a sense of like homeostasis in my body, in my mind, when I finally made the click and then started taking action and empowering myself to make changes. And of course, finding a really amazing partner, it's like I felt love all around, like love from my community, love from my partner, and then internally, just a sense of love that I had not felt prior. It was always a sore spot for me.
I was so struck by the story with Alden. I was listening to a podcast the other day with Jane Fonda, actor and activist. She's 85 now, and she was saying how we make a big deal of getting old being difficult, but actually, she said, it's really hard to be young. It's really complicated to become yourself, to come of age, and that's actually what she finds to be the most difficult part of life. And I feel like there's this culture of adulthood where we're taught to look at young people as if they don't understand, and we're quick to dismiss them. And I think we've got that so wrong. I feel like we can all relate to this as young people. We want to do better than our parents did, whether that's in terms of our diet or our parenting or in terms of our religious tradition, whatever it is, we're trying to do better and to stretch the culture. And Alden was such a great example of how young people are stretching us in ways that are so incredible and inclusive and challenging us in deep and meaningful ways. And yeah, it was just a great part of the story.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, it's interesting because Peter Williams, who is the brain behind Gender Outlaw, when he put the story together, and I didn't really realize until I saw it in front of me the age range of people that I hang out with on a daily basis, from my students being 12 to 18 to my community being in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. It's really incredible that I actually have that experience because I feel like I learn a lot each day. And one thing I will say to your point, Lauren, is that children and youth in general just have a beginner's mind. They aren't set in their ways. And I feel like as you get older, it's easier to just be more complacent and to be more stubborn and to kind of fall into what works, right? Like that adage, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But then it leaves you with a lot of blind spots because things might be broken that you just think are fine. And the youth, they question everything. They haven't got set in their ways yet, and they're much more malleable. And if we can have that beginner's mindset just in whatever we do, I think we probably age a lot more gracefully.
Yeah. Wonderfully said. I'm interested to hear, Tyler, you share about that younger version of yourself and the world that you're a part of there. Southern California is a pretty unique place for those of us across the Pacific in Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand, and these much smaller populations. Like you have the whole population of Australia right there in Southern California. So it's kind of like for people like myself, when we go to your home area there, it's like going to the future. It's really like seeing everything sped up and many more steps along the path in lots of ways. In some ways, it's not so great with pollution and with urban sprawl and divisiveness and community and whatnot. And in other ways, it's amazing because then you have groups who have figured out how to remedy certain situations or correct ill relationships. And I was just wondering if you could speak to perhaps how things felt back when you were a teenager and you're between 12 and 18, and then perhaps how it would feel to be between 12 and 18 now in that area.
Ooh, that's a really difficult one. So like for me, I knew that I was attracted to women at a very, very young age. And so I knew, gosh, I was probably 7 when I had my first crush on a girl, and I knew not to say anything.
Wow.
Out of self-preservation. And so when I think of community and I think of where I grew up at that time, yeah, it would be fantastic if it was a welcoming, open, loving community that I could come out and feel cared for. But instead, it felt very isolating. And so on the surface, Orange County for me was, beautiful, white picket fence, if you had like that analogy, right? Like great home and lots of friends and play out in the streets until late at night and no one has to worry about you. It's like communal in a sense, but that's just a lot of facade, at least in my experience. Internally, I was really isolated and felt very alone. I think that's common for a lot of teenagers. I think that as they're developing that sense of self, it is very scary. So youth find their niche, their community. Then when they feel safe in that community, they start to grow. But I never found that in high school. My community was through athletics. I had a basketball team. They were my best friends, but they didn't know anything about me behind closed doors, right? And so I was kind of just carrying the secret. If I was in Orange County now, honestly, I would say it would be the similar experience based on what I'm hearing. I have family in Orange County, but I don't go down there very often other than to surf. And so what I hear, in California, there's laws to protect children. If they come out, teachers don't out them to their family. We don't have book bans. It's illegal to do that. In other states, you have to report if somebody comes out to you, or there's certain books that you can't read to your students in other states. But in California, it's really inclusive as far as policy goes. In certain districts, specifically in Orange County, there's parents fighting these laws and protesting these laws based on inclusivity and child safety. And so I could see myself being just, if I was trans, if I knew I was trans in Orange County at this time, I'd probably keep it to myself until I felt safe to come out. And in the school that I work at now, it's a lot more inclusive. I'm in an independent school. There's lots of kids that identify outside of the binary there. We have some really great policies in place where we support and mentor our kids and give them the space to explore. Just because somebody comes out doesn't necessarily mean that's the end all be all. For many it is, but if someone's questioning, just give them the tools and the safety and the blanket to, like the safety blanket to question. Encourage, right? I think questioning anything is important, right? That's how you learn and how they learn about themselves. And I think this is no different, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about binaries. I'd love to go there. We're all water folk here. So I like to think that we're primed to understand that binaries are a shorthand way of understanding the world. We talk about sea and sky. We talk about ocean and land. but we understand that there's infinite variation and diversity and many different ecosystems within those extremities. So I like to think that we understand it because we love to dwell in those in-between spaces as surfers. We trace lines from the deep right into the shallows, onto the sand. You've said that body surfing, like most sports, is binary. Can you talk us through what that's meant for you?
Without going into the science of human sexuality and biology, let's just stick to the topic of binary in sport. For most divisions, there's a men's division and a women's division. And like you said, it's a pretty binary way of thinking of things. For me, I identify as non-binary. And so that's for me personally, I know I am non-binary. I know I'm not a trans man. I know I'm not a woman. I feel that has nothing to do with how I express myself. As far as my gender expression, I've always expressed myself more masculinely, whatever that means, right? What does it mean to be masculine? I don't know. These definitions are pretty arbitrary.
They are, but so many people don't because they're in a privileged position of not feeling like they have to question. Most people are willing or able to just slide into the pre-decided norms of our culture without having to question.
Right. To your point, gender is a construct, yet it doesn't exist, right? But it does exist with very real world implications, like a gender division in surfing, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, because I present more masculine and I'm on testosterone and I like to be perceived in the world as a masculine person, for me, competing with the men was kind of a no-brainer. I would feel uncomfortable competing against women. And even before I started taking testosterone, because there was a 2-year overlap where I had top surgery and I wasn't sure. I was afraid, honestly, to take testosterone. It took me about 2 years to wrap my brain around it. And in those 2 years, first year I competed in the women's division. So had top surgery. I went out there shirtless and it felt weird for me. It wasn't weird. The competitors were great, so supportive. It was fantastic. But I internally felt awkward. And then that second year, I switched over to the men's division and, looks like a young lad in a sea of men. But, to me, it felt right. And the thing is I had to make that choice. Well, no, I could choose not to compete. For me, the choice was easy because I identified with expressing myself more masculinely, and being in a men's division didn't bother me. Have I been as successful in the men's division? No. Do I think it's for any other reason that I just haven't been pushing myself as hard? Yes. So I don't know if there's any disadvantages or advantages there. If I wanted to be successful competing, I would practice, and I haven't been. So I was just lucky enough that in the women's division, I didn't have to practice so much and I was okay. And I don't, it just changes with the times. And the thing is about these divisions, like I said, gender's arbitrary, right? So how do you define what it is to be a woman? How do you define what it is to be a man when really we're all just going off of biases that have been there for ages, right?
I was going to say that a lot of people point to the difference between sex and gender in this conversation. Do you think that that's still a relevant avenue, speaking about biological assignment of sex and how that's different from the presentation that we choose in our everyday lives of gender?
As far as in competition, is that, I just wanted to clarify.
I think generally in the conversation for trans people, is that still a relevant part of the conversation? I've seen, for example, I've been really inspired by Alok Vaidmanon's work and their book reports in particular, and how they brought up this science that was showing that in the 1900s, there were people looking into the ways that even what we call biological sex was part of a continuum, that there was no definitively opposite and separate categories, man and woman. Like gender, they've very much been constructed as well.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think if we think of the categories that we know, male and female, I think it's been proven that there's more variability within the same gender or within the same sex than there is across genders. So within the male category, you can have more variability of what it means to be male than, say, someone in the male category and someone in the female category. They could be more similar than apart. And that goes with presentation, it goes with expression, and it also goes with just how our bodies adapt to hormones and all the things that make us uniquely us, right? Chromosomes, etc. Right? I think I said this in the film. I will stand by it. If we think of the world population as a galaxy of stars, no one star is the same and no two people are the same. So when we think of this humans, we're all just our own individual stars. There's no right or wrong way to be that star. And I think that's what makes us so amazing. And it's something to celebrate versus get angry about or try to police. And I think the same goes with gender, right? I'm not on a spectrum. I'm just me. And however I am, like, as far as my expression and internally what's going on, I don't necessarily care to define it, because all I know is for once in my life, I can see a future and I feel really good in my body and I'm happy day to day. And I hope everybody has that moment where they're like, oh yeah, I'm me and I'm pretty badass and I enjoy getting to do what I do every day, no matter how mundane or how extraordinary.
Please stay tuned while we take a quick break to acknowledge the folks who help make our podcast possible.
If the first 50 years were an experiment,
to prove that a business could be
responsible
and successful,
turns out it's not just possible,
it's profitable.
So what's next?
What's next is simple. It's human-powered, and it's finding the joy in doing difficult things.
What's next is turning capitalism on its head
and putting all our money where our mouth is.
What's next is unstoppable.
Thanks to Patagonia for their continued support this season and for prioritizing purpose over profit to protect our wondrous planet, our only home. Sanuk has been advocating for a more playful and inclusive surfing culture for more than 2 decades while crafting some of the comfiest footwear around. Thanks for your support, Sanuk, and for encouraging water people around the globe to protect their happy places. Learn more about Sanuk's partnership with the Surfrider Foundation at sanuk.com.
Would we be able to zoom into the surfing experience and specifically lineups? I was interested to hear you speak about the surfing events and the competitions and going to those and participating in those. And it makes me think back to a few years ago. I was with a whole bunch of really well-known surfers on a boat trip in Indonesia, and I got to sit down with them and ask them why they all began surfing in competitions in their early surfing lives. And all of them, who were previous world champions and on tour at the time, they all said that the contests were fun, but it was mostly about getting to be there with your friends. And it was the fact that you're at the beach all day and you're shooting the shit and you're just having a good time. And then, yeah, there's one person who walks away a winner at the end, but everyone else is losers together. And it's fun. It's a community thing. And I'm curious, why are you going to a body surfing competition? What is it that makes you want to be involved in that world when it is literally a divided world? Like, divisions are just like these railroads that lock you in. What is it about that makes you want to turn up there, knowing that as who you are, it'll be a unique experience there among that kind of crowd?
Yeah, twofold. One, exactly what you said. All my body surfing buddies are my friends. And you get to be in a heat with 5 other people and no one's snaking you. There's no boards there. You have the whole place to yourself just to body surf. Absolutely, I'm going to sign up for that. Honestly, I started competing. It wasn't on my radar at all. I think my first contest was in 2018, and it was a dare, literally, from the Gillis guys that I had been body surfing with. I started off body surfing with a hand plane because they were trendy at the time, and I think they still are. And my Gillis buddies were just like, you're not a real body surfer. You're a hand planer. You should do our competition that we're hosting tomorrow and prove yourself. If you want to be in our club, you should prove yourself. I was like, it's tomorrow? They're like, yeah. it's also, I don't know, $40. So give us some cash. And I was like, this is a little sketch. But I really wanted to show up and prove myself to these guys, my mentors who I respected, right? So I did. That's what started me going. It also helped that I won. So, I was like, oh, I can show up and win. Oh, this feels great. Let's keep competing. That was the only time that happened. So, but now, like when I show up in California, there's body surfing clubs up and down the coast. So from Santa Cruz down to San Diego.
Really?
And yeah, there are. And these body surfing clubs, a lot of them have been around for a very long time. And so, when I go up to Santa Cruz, I get to see people that I don't get to see very often, or we'll all meet in Huntington Beach for the Chubasco's event. And, different people come from different walks, and there's worlds down in San Diego and Del Mar. And it's just a reunion every time we meet. And we talk about trying to get together outside of competitions, but it's next to impossible. You know how that goes: lives, kids, family, work, etc. But we all, there's a core group of us that will come to those competitions and have a day of it. Like you said, it's all about just hanging out and catching up and being a big family. And, and a lot of these clubs were around pre-social media. So they're not, maybe some of the older folks are on Facebook talking back and forth, and us younger people are on Instagram. And I don't think any of us are on TikTok. So, but, we chat all throughout the year, like comment on each other's videos, just sharing the stoke all the time, and not just water videos and photos, but births, marriages, breakups, all the things, right? We're all connected. And so it's a moment where we all designate our time and make sure we meet up in person to keep that community going.
That's so great. I wish the WSL was that kind of atmosphere.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great?
Well, there's no money in body surfing, right? So it's just a little bit, it's a little different.
Yeah. Is there a dress code? Because I know down in Australia here, it's all budgie smugglers, and if you wear anything else, it's not that cool. So.
Well, us purists, definitely, they're not budgies. They're mostly Speedos, but I have a pair of Keels that I love dearly.
Nice.
Yeah. But yeah, us old folk, original, I think the OGs wear Speedos, and the tighter and the wider your legs are, the better it is.
Yeah, totally.
The only other thing I would say to answer your question, Dave, is I also like to be there out of spite. Like, yeah, I'm trans and I'm competing, but I think it's not necessarily for the people that I go to meet, because they've all been really supportive on and off the beach. Like I have been really blessed to have a very supportive community, but I do like to post about it. I like to put it out there. I like to be like, yes, I'm trans and I compete and I'm an athlete and this is my life. And I have the right to do this as a human because I want to, right?
Yeah.
It's just that's the other piece, but it's a small piece compared to the family part.
Yeah, but it is a piece, and I wanted to know about that, if that was there as a motivator, because you can only imagine, when we come into a healthy moment in our lives, that we imagine a younger version of ourselves, or a young someone or anyone else who would love to have an example to follow, would love to perhaps be able to envision growing old and perhaps feeling like you right now, like comfortable in your skin. And that's a wonderful thing to do. So I'm glad you shared that. Spite's never sounded so great.
I know, right?
I feel like the conversation around being trans and surfing has been so reactionary and kind of violent and just not very respectful. And I think that's pretty indicative of where surf culture is at after this like hyper masculine hangover that we're still in. I feel like surf culture is trying to find a new way after it being so created by and for a particular group of people. And we're all trying to figure out what that new direction is. So yeah, it's so important to have people like yourself so bravely stepping up and saying, this is who I am and I'm a surfer and I'm here to compete.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And, it's like one of those things as a whole, we can say that, like you said, surf culture is in a hangover phase. The global context of talking about human rights and specifically trans rights, that's not necessarily a hangover. We're in it still, right? We're still partying in this binary world that we're in, right? The part where the vitriol comes in and it's just a lack of kindness. I think it's just indicative to how scared we are to be open-minded and to let ourselves question what we know to be true. And I think water people probably have a better ability to open ourselves up to danger, to the unknown, right? Like the going out in a foggy, sharky time and you're just thinking, I'm going to go anyway. And what happens, right? Like we can go step into those scary spaces with an understanding that this is our choice, right? But I think a lot of people, when they are having these conversations, are not necessarily unwilling, or I don't even think they know that they're able to actually take that plunge and go out into the unknown and that it'll be okay. And they're like so stuck on clinging to whatever they believe to be true that it's an attack to challenge that truth. And so I try to think about that when I have these conversations with people that are truly unkind or can be pretty challenging to have a discussion with. It's not, I don't see them as bad people. I just see them as being really scared and really stuck to the point where they feel attacked.
I know Bethany Hamilton came out publicly against the WSL's choice to allow trans women to compete in WSL sanctioned events. And you did a little post and toward Bethany, I saw. Is that how you feel about her position, which was to exclude, I don't know if it was trans people or just trans women from competition?
Pretty sure it was just trans women.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, I don't think Bethany is a bad person. And I think that she's done wonders when it comes to the sport of surfing and specifically getting women involved in surf, right? She's been really influential in a lot of positive ways. I wish that in a moment of her questioning things that she actually had a conversation with a trans woman. But sometimes when you feel attacked, you strike first, right? And the things that she said are her truths. I don't agree with them. And I think they were really, really harmful, actually, because so many people follow her, like, because she is such an icon in the surf industry and culture. And so, I honestly think that she's probably a good person at heart and is just extremely stuck. And I wish that there were opportunities to have those conversations. Like if I could speak with her one-on-one, I would love that opportunity. Whether or not I'm going to change her mind, no. But who knows, Maybe she'll watch Gender Outlaw one day and be like, oh, wow, this makes sense for some reason, it just takes empathy. It takes one person to break through. And I think that has that ripple effect. You meet one person, like maybe you meet me, and you're like, oh, Tyler's a pretty decent guy. All right. This is trans people are all right people, it's mind boggling, but because why isn't that the default? However, I think there's just a natural fear of the unknown, and people react to it differently.
Speaking of Gender Outlaw, I wanted to ask you about the title. I know about the 94 book by Kate Bornstein. She's a performance artist and activist. Her book was called Gender Outlaw on Men, Women, and the Rest of Us. Did you pull the inspiration for the title from her?
Absolutely not.
Wow.
Fantastic book. Actually, I have currently searching the interwebs. I have a poster, a UK artist who's a trans artist. He's a trans man. And his name is Alexander Jace Kelly. And his Instagram is Sweet Cowboy Blues. I just figure, got to support our trans artists, especially in the UK right now. And I have a poster of his on my wall. And it says Gender Outlawed, and it's an illustration. And when I saw it, I loved it and I bought it. And when my friend Peter came over, he saw it and he loved the poster. And so that was the reason why we called it Gender Outlaw. I think the poster is in like the opening clip, like right before the movie starts. So yeah, that I wish it had more meaning than that, but no, it was just a cool poster on my wall in my apartment at the time.
What else is inspiring you right now, Tyler, in terms of body surfing? Yeah, who have been your influences in that part of your life?
Oh my gosh. In surfing, body surfing is exploding, at least in my Instagram feed. It's probably the algorithm, right? But I'm seeing some incredible body surfing that's like mind blowing to me. Just the maneuvers that are being pulled off, the limits being pushed, and all over the world, right? From big wave surfing to things that I wouldn't want to do on a board either. Like just the strength of the human spirit when it comes to big wave body surfing. And then just like the style and beauty and the fluidity of some of the body surfing, especially in Hawaii, is just mind boggling to me. Mm-hmm. To me, it's like I get my little dopamine rush. I know I shouldn't go to Instagram for my dopamine rush, but I do. I go and I spend a few minutes and I scroll and I'm like, God, I'm just frothing, mind surfing all these waves. And I mean, there's probably countless accounts that I follow that are dedicated to body surfing. But really, when I think of like what gets me motivated day to day, one, it's just my community. It's waking up and getting salty with the same old guys. And one of my body surfing brothers, his name's John. He has really bad dad jokes and riddles. And, some of them are pretty interesting. The riddles, they're challenging. But they're always like, they're very punny.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
You're being very kind right now.
Yeah. And then my other body surfing brother, his name's Dave Hazard, and we call him Hazard or Moontan because he's super pasty white. And as soon as the sun comes up, he's out of the water already. He's 77.
Wow, great.
He's 77 and he's charging, it's like we'll go down to Newport and he's out there just like mine like a bull. He just goes out there and he's more obsessed than I am. Like he'll wake up, even if he doesn't get in the water, he's going to make a surf check. He's texting everybody first. He's letting us know where to park if they're street sweeping. It's like, he's the ultimate zealot. And it's all just pure passion. He doesn't compete. He just loves to be in the water. And so I think daily, we joke about how, his waves we're starting to count down the amount of waves he has left. So it's lighthearted. We joke about it, but it's honest, it's a reckoning with the inevitable end. And so I think that motivates me to get in the water every time I can, because I just want to share as many waves with him as I can and be a part of it, learn as much from him as I can, as far as just fueling that fire, that stoke. And then honestly, my students, that keeps me going every day, because I think we alluded to this earlier with the spike comment. But, I like being a mentor. That's why I'm a teacher. And if I can be that person that students could look up to, whether or not they come out to me, whether or not I know, I just like being somebody that they can see and be and see themselves in the future. It's like, okay, well, this person has made it and they're happy and I can make it too. And I think that gets me going the most, probably day to day, just being out there and just living life. And I love doing podcasts like this and I like being out there, but I'm not a celebrity, I don't like to consider myself that way either. I just like to be out there and do my thing like a regular human, right? And hopefully it's the monotony, actually. It's like the boring, regular human that just happens to be trans that people can see themselves in. Like, oh, it's just another human. Those kids can be like, yeah, I don't have to be anything extraordinary other than just myself, which is pretty darn extraordinary in and of itself, right? And I can't stress that enough. It's like every day is just a gift. And so we all should be able to enjoy that gift any way we want.
Speaking of being seen, you mentioned you're in a loving partnership right now. Would you be willing to tell us a bit about your love story?
Yeah. So my partner name is Marit. She is Norwegian. We met, interestingly enough, on my birthday. Must have been 2.5 years ago. And my birthday's in June. I was in a downtown LA hotel pool, living it up. And her best friend has a birthday that's one day away from mine. And so she was at the same pool, living it up with her best friend. And that was it. I can't give any more details. But we met, and she was living in Santa Barbara at the time. So that's it's a 2.5 to 3 hour drive sometimes from me. And so we kept it really low key for a few months. I mean, by a few months, we rarely saw each other. And I think, let's see, if I put it together, June, like maybe 6 or 7 months later, we decided to actually take a stab at this distance relationship and make it a thing. And it's been 2.5 years. I went to Norway last year for the first time. And her family's amazing. They all watched the film. They thought it was great. It was just, she's a magical human. She's in the film. So she's not that, it's not that discreet anymore.
No.
But that was early on, which is funny. So
I don't think was she not in the first cut? Because I think I saw an early cut for a film festival. And was she in the earliest cut?
Well, she was in the film from the get-go.
Okay, I didn't remember seeing her in the earliest cut that we saw. It may have been 2 years ago. Maybe not. Maybe I'm remembering wrongly.
The only public version she's in.
Yeah.
There was a cut that Peter put together. Literally, we shot for one day, and it was like a 17-hour day. And we did a rough cut of a story that was like 20 minutes long. And it had all these pieces, but we knew at that moment that this is something that we wanted to actually take our time and do. She was not in that rough cut because she wasn't at my apartment at the time. But we kept filming for like over the course of 9 months, and she was in the final product.
There's some beautiful body surfing shots in the film now, I wanted to say.
Yeah. That was like one lucky day in Newport. And the shots that she is in, one of them's at the Ventura, South Jetty Swells puts on a contest at the Ventura Harbor. And I think that was maybe a month after we decided to like start dating more consistently. And so I was like, oh, do you want to be in this?
In the deep end.
Yeah, exactly. But honestly, we kind of already knew that that it was going to be okay. So, and so far, so good.
Dating and relationships put all of us in the most vulnerable of positions. How long do you wait to reveal that you're trans to someone that you're dating? I can imagine that would be so potentially scary to share something so personal with someone you don't even know if they're going to be in your life for a long time. How was that for you?
Well, for me, it was pretty easy because we were at the pool and I was in a pair of Speedos. So you could tell by the scars on my face, on my chest, and my boyish good looks that I was trans. But
wow, Speedo's sales are going to go through the roof when this comes out because we're really talking them up in this conversation.
Yeah. I'm just letting you know it's a bold move. 60% of the time, it works every time.
Right.
So I didn't have to have that conversation. It was out there from the moment she met me. And so it's interesting because we never had the conversation, and it didn't really come up until she was going to tell her parents about me. And I hadn't realized that she hadn't come out to her parents. And so she had to go through the process of telling her parents, hey, I'm seeing this guy, and just so you know, he's trans. And I guess that makes me queer. I remember coming out to my mother, and I was so petrified, and I lost a lot when I did. And so for her to have the courage and bravery to do that after meeting me and dating me for a few months, it just blows my mind how brave she is, and just how much love is there. Like to take that leap and to be really vulnerable with your parents is probably harder than being vulnerable with somebody that you're dating or want to date or want to see romantically. So that to me was just like mind blowing how quickly and easily she was able to do so and so confidently. And it just goes to speak to her spirit. And so I lucked out. And then to your question though, when it comes to dating as a trans person, you're right. It is very vulnerable. And the thing is for me, when I first came out as trans to myself, like I mentioned earlier, I had a lot of shame and a lot of internalized transphobia that I still had to work through. And so wasn't dating at the time really or maybe I was partnered at the time and I was going through the transition, but I didn't have those conversations. And I don't think I could have. I probably would have taken myself off the market just till I could get my bearings, really. But honestly, I feel so comfortable in my skin now. And I feel so content with just who I am, physically, mentally, emotionally, etc., that for me, it's like a point of pride. So when I come out to somebody, it's not as scary. It's like, hey, I'm trans and I'm happy to be trans. And by the way, my name's Tyler. How are you? Kind of a thing, right? I don't lead with that. That was a terrible pickup line. But to the whole point is, to me, I want people to know that about me, because if you don't know that about me, then you're not going to know a huge part of who I am. To me, if somebody comes out to you, it's a gift. They're giving themselves a piece of you, a really intimate nugget of knowledge. And that's a gift. That means they trust you. And so, or they want to build a relationship with you in some way, shape, or form, whether it's romantic or otherwise. And so, like, if you're given a gift, what are you going to do? You say thank you and you cherish it. And that's how I view coming out now. When I come out to people, I don't come out to strangers, it's just not enough time in the day because I have to come out regularly to people. But if I'm doing so in a meaningful way in a conversation, it means that I feel safe with you, I trust you, or I want to get to know you. And this is a really integral part of me.
How did you work through your own internalized transphobia? What does that process look like?
Therapy. Honestly, it was a lot of unlearning. It was just a lot of breaking down of stereotypes, messaging that I have been receiving from the world. And a little bit, for me, I started transitioning medically. So I started taking testosterone during the pandemic. And so for me, it was cocooning, actually. I was really fortunate to have a space and the time that I could, I still had a job, I still had a home, I had my health, and I was going through this transition in a vacuum where I didn't have to listen to other people. I didn't have to go out into the supermarket and get looks from people. I could just cradle myself in my safe haven and then kind of come out new. And that's what I did, actually. So for me, the lockdown here was really actually probably one of the best times of my life as far as introspection goes and the ability to slow things down. And I wish society was built where we actually had more time to do that, because for me, it was life-changing. And it helped me process a lot of the fears and the shame and everything else that I had previously held on to.
Tyler, do you share with people what, I guess, navigational system of therapy is really helpful for you? If someone comes to you and wants to have that kind of conversation, like, who can I speak with? What resources do I have to tap into and lean into? Are you willing to share some of those?
Yeah, so, as a teacher, if someone comes out to me, my first question is, well, do you have support, right? And as a teacher, I have to have good boundaries with my students. And so my next question is, are you seeing somebody who can support you, whether that's our school counselor or beyond? And there's so much information out there now that most people, at least my young students, they have the Instagram accounts that they follow. They have the people that they subscribe to. And it's like, there's so many creators out there that are putting out really fantastic work. For the people that I say are still trying to learn about gender identity, Lauren, you mentioned a look, and I think he's amazing. Sorry, I think they are amazing. Look at me.
Oh, that makes me feel better. We all mispronoun.
We all mess up. We all mispronoun, and the best thing we can do is say sorry and then move on. Skylar Baylor has put out a new book, which I haven't read yet, but I really like his content. And he is a swimmer. I think he was the first collegiate swimmer who's
Pink
trans.
Manta Ray?
Yep, Pink Manta Ray. And funny enough, I heard about Skylar from my student Alden, because they both went to Harvard together. So, it's the youth, the youth They have so much information at their fingertips. And of course, if my journey, like I needed somebody that I could talk to. And I have the privilege of being able to afford a therapist that, you know, with our healthcare, you need to have a specific provider and then they only give you certain options. And most of those options are not people with my same shared experience, you know, like maybe they're cis or maybe they're older, or maybe they're, you know, whatever, and not queer in any way, shape, or form. And so I had the privilege that I was able to go someone who's queer, and having a queer therapist who could relate to me on those life experiences was really important. And that's the hard part about suggesting, well, like, have you spoken to someone, right? Have you spoken to a therapist? Because most people don't have access to that. And especially people who don't have benefits to their work. And if those benefits probably don't cover therapy. And so that's really challenging to assume that people are like, oh, we'll just go to therapy. You know, sometimes you have to be more grassroots. You have to find the people that you connect with. Maybe maybe it is Instagram people, right? Which can be terrifying because there's lots of people that put out terrible content as well, right? So it's really challenging for people to have access to quality help. Having said that, there's also, you know, a lot of great organizations that are putting out fantastic content and then also can link people through whatever NPOs that are out there, right? If a lot of my students, I'll have them call Teen Line, which is students talking to other teenagers who can network them to the help that they need. When it comes to people who are in crises, we have like the Trevor Project, you know, it's just, there's lots of orgs out there. And I think my biggest point I'm kind of going in circles now, but I think the biggest point is we can't assume that everybody has access to therapy.
Yeah.
And so it's really like, for me, the big message is find your community or find somebody who you can talk to, find someone who you feel safe with. And if that's me, then I'll do my best to network you to people that can help, because I'm not a therapist. I can't do that. That's too much of a responsibility, but I can be someone that you can trust. And so that's always been my message for anybody coming to me, is I'll do what I can to help.
I think that's great advice for any human being on the planet at this point in time. We live in a time of eroded community where so many of us feel a sense of disconnection. We lack a sense of belonging because we don't have that deep sense of community that maybe our ancestors had. And so reconnecting, I think, is just spot on advice for anyone, all of us.
Yeah. And, you know, it's amazing. We've only connected really now via this interview. It's the first time I've seen your faces. And I mean, outside of Instagram, right? And have these conversations, but I feel connected to you across the world. So a 19-hour difference or something like that. So it's like within our communities, we have, I don't know, there's like-minded people that are really supportive. I know that we've talked about surf industry as a whole being, for lack of a better word, pretty toxic, but we find our people, we find our niche. And one of the things that makes this so beautiful is that our niche is very inclusive. It's built on inclusivity. It's built on bringing people in of all walks of life. And that's been really special to find, period. I've been really lucky to find a community like that. And for our students, you know, that's happening too. And it's all digital. I think it's one of the many ways that, you know, our technology is actually helping with our connection. It can hurt, obviously. There's been ways that it's been very divisive as well. But for a lot of kids, that's how they connect across the world with other people. That's how they find their people, is online. And I think that's pretty awesome.
You're uniquely positioned, Tyler, to reflect on the experience of body surfing, both with and without breath. Dave and I talk about this a lot. I blame my lack of speed and skill as a body surfer on having the drag that comes from having larger breaths. And Dave has kind of built-in concave. So I was really excited to ask you, what has your experience been in terms of streamlining your chest? Has it made a difference?
This is a fantastic question. Well, first of all, when I had breasts, there was no way I was not wearing a wetsuit, because as we all have probably all experienced at one point in time, if you're wearing a bathing suit, a boob's coming out. no matter what. If you're body surfing otherwise, nipples are going to be out.
Totally.
So it's just the nature of the beast. It's going to happen. And so that was probably the biggest hindrance to speed, right? Because you're just kind of always kind of adjusting to make sure that one doesn't slip out. Having said that, my boobs weren't really that big. And so when I wore a wetsuit, I was pretty streamlined. However, I will say that since I've been taking testosterone, my wingspan, like my back, the width of my back is bigger now. And so I think that actually does help me a little bit when it comes to surface area. Like if a wave's a little bit fatter and it's a little harder to kick into, you get that like nice little dolphin kick and get underwater. And when I pop out, I feel like I have more surface area. But that's just me compared to old me. I think that would be anybody with a big surface area. You know, if we think of like all those time surfers are like, man, I wish I would have brought my bigger board. You know, like
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a jab.
No.
But how many liters do you have now? No, but I have felt like maybe it's confidence, maybe it's just me getting stronger, maybe it's a surface area. Who knows? There's no study out there that can tell me what the difference is. But I will say from post-top surgery to pre-top surgery, I surf bigger waves. I'm more aggressive, less fear. And I feel like I can make it out of a couple more barrels. But who knows? That could be just time in the water too.
Yeah.
Mm.
In the film, Tyler, you say that one of your goals as a teacher is to help your students feel more embodied. I was wondering what that means to you now, to be embodied.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think we've been talking about this sense of embodiment this whole time. You know, for me, pre-coming out as trans, there was that missing piece that I was just existing day to day. I didn't feel really in control. I was just maybe on cruise control, just showing up day to day without really any sense of self. And so things can kind of be gray at that time. But now I feel a lot more grounded, a lot more anchored. And that sense of embodiment is really coming from like a deep place within my gut that's just a knowing of who I am. And this knowing it just imbues everything I do, from my relationships to my surfing to my teaching. I mean, I know this sounds a little corny, but like coffee tastes better. Sunrises are prettier. It's the little things that are so much more joyous and joyful that I think that only comes with like, I don't know, this just sense of contentment of being who you are and liking the person that you are. I think that's a big part of it, is when you feel like you have the agency to take that path, to make yourself, to create yourself, whatever that path looks like for you. When you finally have that ability to do so, then you start having some pride in who you are, because you've created it, you've molded it. And it's not because of anybody telling you what to do or shaping you or making decisions for you. It comes from a place of complete freedom and agency. And to me, that's what embodiment is. It's just feeling a sense of pride in who I am because I took the time to build myself up piece by piece.
Thanks so much for listening with us today. If you like what you heard, please consider sharing an episode with a friend. Our editor this season is the multi-talented Ben Alexander. The podcast soundtrack was composed by Shannon Soul Carroll, with additional tunes by Dave and Ben. We'll be continuing today's conversation on Instagram, where we're at Water People Podcasts, and you can subscribe to our very infrequent newsletter to get book recommendations, questions we're pondering, behind-the-scenes glimpses into recording the podcast, and more via our website, waterpeoplepodcasts.com.